Welcome back to Mayhem and Family Fun! Did I trick you with being sad? I guess I did. Now look at my shirt. I know, it looks delicious. We are back with the funny read alouds, and yesterday we read Little Miss Shutterbox. She talked and talked and talked and talked and talked. So this is our last and final book of the series. We are reading Mr. Noisy. Let's start. Mr. Noisy was a very noisy person indeed. For example, if Mr. Noisy were reading this story to you, he'd be shouting at the top of his voice. And the top of Mr. Noisy's voice is a very loud place. You can hear it from 100 miles away. You see? He's reading the exact same book we're reading. See that little thing right back there? Instead, we have this. For example, when most people sneeze, you can hear them to the next room. But Hachoo! When Mr. Noisy sneezes, you can hear him in the next country. His eyes just look like a black hole. Now, this story starts with Mr. Noisy asleep in bed. In his bedroom in his house at the top of the hill. He was snoring. Of course he was. And as you imagine, when Mr. Noisy snores, that snore is worth hearing. Someone will go, it sounds more like a herd of running elephants than a snore. He's in bed. Look at his shoes. They're so big. Then, Mr. Noisy's alarm clock went off. Mr. Noisy's alarm sounds like no other clock in this world. It sounds like a fire engine, which is loud. Mr. Noisy woke up. So did the people who lived in the Wobble Town, which is the bottom of Mr. Noisy's hill. Later that day, Mr. Noisy decided that he had to go shopping. He went out of his house, shutting the door behind him. Bang! The door wobbled. The house wobbled. The whole hill wobbled. Wobble Town wobbled. Even a bird flying high above wobbled. So everything wobbled. How wobbled. Then Mr. Noisy walked down the hill. Clomp. He walked to the baker's shop. Crash as the door went open. Bang as he shut it. I like a loaf of bread! Boomed Mr. Noisy to Mrs. Crump, the baker. Miss Crump trembled and sold him a loaf. Then Mr. Noisy walked along the street to the butcher. He walked in the butcher shop. Boomed Mr. Noisy to Mr. Bacon, the butcher. Mr. Bacon trembled and sold him some meat. Afterwards, Mr. Crump met Mr. Bacon in the street. We must do something about Mr. Noisy being so noisy, he said. She absolutely, replied Mr. Bacon. But what? I don't know, Mrs. Crump whispered in Bacon's ear. Mr. Bacon smiled a small smile and grew into a brown grin. Mrs. Crump, he said, I think you have the answer. The following day, Mr. Noisy again went down to Wobble Town to shop. He went into Mrs. Crump's shop. I like a loaf of bread! He boomed. Sorry, what did you say? Asked Miss Crump, pretending not to hear. I like a loaf of bread! Mr. Noisy said. Sorry, said Mrs. Crump, putting her hand to her ear. Can you speak up, please? I like a loaf of bread, roared Mr. Noisy. I can't hear you, replied Mrs. Crump. Mr. Noisy came up and went out. Mr. Noisy went to Mr. Bacon's shop. I like a piece of meat! Mr. Noisy booed. Mr. Bacon pretended not to notice. I like a piece of meat! Mr. Noisy shouted. Did you say something? Asked Mr. Bacon. I said I would like a piece of meat, please, roared Mr. Noisy. Pardon? Said Bacon. Mr. Noisy gave up and went out and went home and went to bed hungry. He's really sad. The next day, Mr. Noisy tried again. He went to Mrs. Crump's shop. "I like a loaf of bread," he boomed. "A what?" What? Oh, I thought I raised my eyebrow. Mr. Noisy started shouting at the very top of his voice, "A loaf of..." Then he stopped. Then he thought. Then he said quiet, "I like a loaf of bread, please, Mrs. Crump." Mr. Crump smiled. "Certainly," she said. Then Mr. Noisy went to Mr. Bacon's shop. "I like a piece of meat," he boomed. "Did you say something?" asked Mr. Bacon. "Yes, I did," shouted Mr. Noisy at the very top of his voice. "I like a..." And then he stopped, and then he thought. And then he said quiet, "I like a piece of meat, please, Mr. Bacon." Mr. Bacon smiled. "My pleasure," he said. So carrying his bread and meat, Mr. Noisy set off the home up the hill. Then he stopped. Then he thought. And then, do you know what he did? He tiptoed. Tiptoe was something Mr. Noisy had never tried before. It was fun. So he had a great time tippy-toeing up the hill. Isn't that kind of impossible, tippy-toeing up the hill? Mr. Noisy arrived at his front door. He put his hand to open the window, and then he stopped. Then he thought, and then, do you know what he did? He opened the door very quietly and stepped inside. Then he shut the door very gently. Quietly and gently were two things Mr. Noisy had ever tried before either, and they were fun too. So he's really happy that he tried these new things. And do you know something? Mr. Noisy isn't as noisy as he used to be. And you want to know something? The people of Wobbleville are delighted, especially Mrs. Crump and Mr. Bacon. You know something else? See, they're down here smiling. They're at the top. That's his house at the top of the hill. Mr. Noisy has even learned how to whisper. See all the characters. Well, that was our final stories of the day. The stories we read all throughout these days were Mr. Noisy, Mrs. Chatterbox, Mrs. Naughty, Little Miss Giggles, Little Miss Sunshine, Little Miss Bossy, Little Miss Fun, Mr. Mischief, Mr. Happy, Mr. Birthday, Mr. Messy, and Mr. Tickle. Well, I hope you enjoyed these entire series. I sure had fun reading these books because they're really cute, really funny, and teaches you lessons every single day. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. See you guys